How did you start with your podcast? What
I
drove you
started.
to start?
Okay, so yeah, what drove me to start back in 2016 was September. Was, as I was saying earlier, the fact that um, the bands that I was very much interested in just weren't being covered on radio. And actually have a place called the Winston to thank for this, because there was a little bar slash pub in Durban called the Winston, and we used to go. This was 2016, so I was probably like still in varsity, and I just remember going to the Winston and getting to see different bands. There was a band called Mouse, there was a band called The Myths. And those two bands in particular, I found myself wondering, like, who are these guys? What is their story? And, obviously listening to radio and all that there, I would never get that. Till this day, radio hasn't even covered majority of the artists that are local and so on. So I was like, you know what? Let me just get my cell phone, because that's all I had at the time, just a little iPhone 5S. And I was like, I want to interview these guys. So
Really?
what am I
Oh,
gonna?
wow.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, okay, what am I gonna do this on though? Like, I'm the type of person who, I well back then I never used to do any research. I used to just be like, okay, I've got a cell phone, it records. I want to talk to those guys. Let me contact them via email and see if they'd be keen to do something. So the bed behind us, I was literally on my bed, this very same bed, and I came up with the concept. Okay, what am I going to call this? What's it got to do with? And that's when I was thinking, okay, these guys are underground artists, so this obviously needs to be an underground centered thing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to be talking to people that aren't mainstream, so underground needs to be there. And then it's like, okay, what is synonymous with underground? And the word sludge came up in my mind, and I'm like, okay, what is sludge? It's grimy, gritty. That element of it would represent how raw everything would be, because I knew going into it, I'm like, okay, I'm using a cell phone to record this. I don't have a studio. I'm going to be recording these artists in my father's car. And I'm like, okay, this is not going to be professional at all.
Yeah.
So the sludge element of that was that hands-on DIY, dirty type thing. So that's when I got the name together, and then I contacted those particular bands. We met up at the Pavilion. It's a shopping center in Durban, and then we did the interview, and I'd also, while creating this, I was like, okay, I think I might need a bit more expertise when it comes to bands and stuff, because as much as I do listen to band music, I do need a different perspective as someone who's solely based in Durban. That's when I contacted a friend of mine. His name is Marcel, who had just come down from Johannesburg. He was exposed to the scene in Johannesburg. So me contacting Marcel when I was making this was basically trying to see if I could get some insights, from someone who is in Joburg, who's seen the bands that side and so on. Maybe you could bring, like a different spin on things. So I contacted Marcel. I went over to his place. We recorded like a pilot episode where, press record, put the phone in the middle of the car and just talk. Funny enough, a lot of people hated that episode, which I understand because we were very young. The audio is not so good. We thought at that time, we thought we knew a lot about, the scene, but we actually did not. But that is what basically just kickstarted it all. And then we interviewed the rest of the band and so on. And yeah, it's just been going ever since. So that's what, to answer the question, that's what inspired me to start this, just finding out more about local musicians, because mainstream media wasn't doing that. And I feel to an extent still isn't really doing that.